I'm Tony Mealy, and this is a Coach Lone Wolf blog and podcast. We are a community of people who are interested in the ways innovators do their craft, protect what they build, and make their way in the world. Our guests and contributors include current and future entrepreneurs, intellectual property specialists, athletes, martial artists, inventors, artists, and anyone I want to talk to.
Sounds good.
Been a long time. When did we meet?
Oh my gosh, this had to have been a good maybe 10, 11 years ago at least.
At least, yeah. It was
least.
a while ago.
Yeah.
Thinking might have been before 2011.
I think it was. I think it was right around 2008, 2009.
Yep.
I mean, wow, maybe 15 years.
So we originally met. You needed some legal help with some stuff.
Yeah.
And then we met, and then we had a lot of mutual interests, and then we kept in touch.
Yeah.
And then you had you were working with a technology company for a little while.
Yeah.
We met again. So Bill is a good friend, and we've known each other for a number of years. And Bill is now, tell me if I'm wrong about any of this.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of give a little synopsis. So Bill is the CEO of his company 529 LLC.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm going to characterize it. They do curriculum and materials.
Yep.
Training and consulting involving certain education-related stuff.
Absolutely.
You are an author, and predominantly of technology-related media and simulations.
That's right. Yeah, for the medical world.
Okay, for the medical world. You're a researcher.
Absolutely do research, but more from how the technology that's being used today, either in an operating room or students learning from the technology, just trying to find out how digital pedagogy is effectively being used or not so effectively being used.
And pedagogy is a bicycle, right?
Yeah, I always describe it as if you ask someone, can you eat a hippopotamus? They say, no, I can't. I said, well, you could if you ate it one bite at a time. So pedagogy is kind of like breaking things up into smaller chunks so that you could learn them, more efficiently.
Yeah, like I say that with an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
There you go.
You're a speaker, and regarding similar topics or overlap.
Yeah, national conferences, Human Anatomy Physiology Society, digital conferences. So yeah, guys, a lot of conferences.
So you got your MD. Where did you go to?
Sport Health Sciences University in Santa Teresa, New Mexico.
Nice. And you are a professor in anatomy and physiology at Bunker Hill Community College in Boston?
Yeah, I'm the chair there.
Okay. Yeah. We mentioned you're a digital author. Among the works that you've authored, one is called Anatomy and Physiology at McGraw-Hill.
Yeah, the Unity of Form and Function. I partnered with Ken Saladin, who is the print author, and then I turned all of the conceptual things into digital learning objects.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you and I met originally to talk about some of that.
Intellectual property, yeah.
Stuff, yeah. You were formerly president of Tuatara Corporation?
Tuatara, yep. That's whenever we met.
Okay. And that was involving technology for education. That's right. So,
yeah, we were basically grabbing content in the same way Google Docs way back when was the only company. There was one guy out of Germany that had invented the code that would allow you to collaborate in real time. While our technology was, integrating all of these different types of learning tools, PowerPoints, textbooks, journal articles online, all of this where you could grab, drag and drop it into a note-taking system to build and then share with other students, other faculty members.
I think you and I met actually years before that. I think we met again, like when we reconnected, I think it was around that time.
That's right, because we were buying the school at that point in time.
Yeah.
That was the first.
And you were also in conversations with McGraw-Hill at the time, so you might have been still in the works of...
Yeah, there was a lot of irons in the fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Bill has not been bored. How many kids you have?
I have 3.
3? What are their ages?
I have a freshman at the University of Maine. She swims for the University of Maine. She's part of the swim team there, a nursing program. And then my son just finished qualifying and swimming at the Olympic trials. He's a junior. And then my youngest is a freshman.
High school?
Junior high school.
And your youngest is a freshman in high
He's
school?
a freshman. Yeah, they're all swimmers.
Wow. So you've been busy there.
Yeah, no, my goodness, yeah.
Wow. My daughter was a swimmer, really good swimmer. She was living in Miami, and there was this coach that encouraged her to swim, and she did it for a little while. But didn't stay with it. She was an amazing swimmer, though.
Good for her.
We go somewhere where there's a body of water, and she scares me.
She'd
just be like a half a mile, 3/4 a mile away, like across the other side of the river or lake, and I'll be like, "Where is she?" And just see like this little spot.
Little speck, yeah. Come back.
This doesn't even phase her. So tell us. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Hubbard, Ohio. It's just outside of Youngstown in the northeast corridor of Ohio.
Wow. Okay. What was it like this?
Small town. I mean, it was great because everyone knew everyone.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, maybe like Peyton's Place, or everybody knew everyone else's business, but in a good way,
Right.
You weren't afraid to give someone a hand if they needed it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big difference coming to New England.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
There's some interesting stories I've heard, which I think some people say are accurate about that. So, I'll tell you in a second. But was it a rural town?
Yeah, very rural. We were right on the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So close to Sharon, Pennsylvania. And so that corridor of steel production, Youngstown, Pittsburgh, and Sharon, they produce 1/3 of the entire world's steel at one point.
Oh, wow. So there was a big industrial blue collar.
Yeah.
And cows.
That was their heyday. Yeah. I mein, lots of farming.
Farming.
In that area. Yeah.
I grew up in Western Massachusetts, right across the street from many, I don't know how many acres there were when they had cows and bulls and
Yeah.
once in a while they would get out and no, we never did. I didn't even know what cow tipping was.
Yeah, they sleep standing up.
Yeah.
And so you can tip them, and then they just come up out of there.
Have you ever done it?
Fired up. I've never done. I've seen people.
I've heard some people say it's a myth because they're like, there's no way you could do it.
Well, no, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Medway, my last place I was living at, there was cows across the street, beef cows. So there were females and mostly males.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of coyotes around, but none of them seemed to bother the cows. Good, as far as I could tell. And but they were hilarious. They were so curious.
Oh, very curious.
Every time I came out, they'd be looking at me.
Yeah, they want to know what you're up to.
Yeah, they're like, "Who's this guy?" And then if I walk up to the fence, they come and see.
Yeah. No, they're pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, the story was there's this person that was from California and they moved to Boston, and they were explaining how Boston people they're just not as nice. And
I don't know.
well, hear me out. So she said, but then she realized that because of an experience she had, she realized that this is the comparison. She said in California, if you break down on the side of the road and you're in trouble, people really feel bad for you as they just drive by. and in Massachusetts, what'll happen is they'll stop, tell you you're an idiot for not taking care of whatever you had to take care of, which is why you're broken down, and then help you.
And that's okay. There's a good balance.
So that's the difference.
Yeah. I've found that people in New England area just so busy. You know what I mean? Like there isn't a lot of downtime in your life. So when you do have your own little personal space and downtime, like you don't really want to be bothered.
Is that a symptom? Is that a long-term thing, or is that a symptom of?
I think it's just so fast-paced.
It's just the way it is in the last 20 years or so. I feel like
maybe, I don't know, but it just seems like since I moved here, which is about 25 years ago.
Okay, yeah,
it's always been that way.
I don't think it used to be that way.
It costs you so much to live here, right? Mm-hmm. What's they just had it on the news. It's like to live comfortably a husband and wife have to make around $125K each just to live comfortably in the Boston, greater Boston area. Because you're paying around 33%.
Could we change the topic?
Yeah.
This is depressing.
It is very.
Each. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't move to Massachusetts. Anybody that's listening to this. It's So I heard that nationally, according to some things I heard, that the average home price now is like $400,000. Probably $40,000.
Easily in towns.
That's nationally.
Yeah. So you can imagine on the South Shore, down around the Situate, Hingham, Cohasset area, it's got to be closer to 7. It's just outrageous. I don't know how.
It's not good. Yeah, no.
And then your real estate taxes.
Yeah.
Paying around 12 to 15 just in real estate taxes.
And it's more expensive in New Hampshire because they don't have
this
personal. They don't have personal state income tax.
Right.
And they don't have sales tax either.
Right.
Okay. Florida's
looking pretty good right now.
It's got no state income taxes in Florida. So you grew up there, and then how old were you? Did you at some point you moved away to go to college, or?
Yeah, I had a full ride scholarship to swim, in college. That's my kids are swimmers.
Okay.
I tried to steer away from it, but they went right for it too.
Okay. Where did you go first for college?
So of all places, I went to Oral Roberts University. That was the first college that offered me full ride. So I went and I swam there.
Where was that?
That's in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was my first big move away from,
what was
small town.
What was your feeling about the cultural differences or similarities?
It was so different. I mean, because holy rollers there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like people who laid hands on people, prayed for them, and spoke in tongues, and
like a different type of Bible.
Totally different vibe. Yeah. I mean, it was like on steroids, sort of like the Pentecostal movement, I guess is what you could call it. So that was very eye-opening, but also a little scary, at the same time. So I stayed there for about a year and a half.
And that was at college specifically?
Yeah, that college.
Greater Tulsa?
Greater Tulsa, no, it was fine.
Was it? But it was still different culturally from where you grew up?
Oh, yeah. Much different. Tornadoes, were a regular thing. Flooding was a, regular thing. All of,
hunting, fishing?
Yeah. Well, that was the same. I mean, in Ohio, we do a lot of hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, big difference.
Oh, wow. Was it the 700 Club? What was the name?
Oral Roberts was, one of the biggest advantages. He's probably most famous. You might remember this on national news where he said that if people didn't donate a certain amount of money for him to build the City of Faith, where they were going to start a medical school, that God said he would kill him if he didn't get the $8 or $9 million.
He was going to kill him personally?
Yeah, that God was going to.
Wow.
And so, this is an interesting story. I was working on campus, to make a few extra shekels. And a girl that I was dating had a key to the prayer tower where he supposedly was praying night and day, never left the prayer tower until the $8 or $9 million came in. So she let me borrow the key. I went up there. There's nobody in there. Nobody. And that's when I said, I got to get out of here.
Wow.
And I couldn't stay there.
Wow. That's wild. It's interesting. Some of that stuff is really interesting. I have a friend who said his family was in a cult.
It seemed like that. It really did.
I won't say which one, but he was telling me about it. And there's a lot of interesting flavors of, I guess, belief systems.
Yeah.
Belief systems. And that's an interesting one because I feel like... was it Pat Robertson? That was the guy?
Pat Robertson was 700 Club.
Was he affiliated in some way with?
Well, I think Oral was affiliated with Pat, and then
Did Pat have his own school?
Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker, like they were all, and then even Jerry Falwell started Liberty University.
Oh, so Jerry Falwell, he's the one who started Liberty?
Yeah.
Did Pat Robertson have his own university?
I don't know if he had his own university, but he definitely had his hands in politics.
I thought he had some affiliation with one of the universities, but yeah, and then he ran for president, I remember.
Yeah, right.
And I would those those religious leaders at I guess you could
Swag. It was a bunch.
they're very active back in the 80s and
It made
90s.
a lot of money.
Very active. They're very vocal.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be as vocal anymore.
Social media, cell phones,
Yeah.
video capabilities, posting live, I mean, you can't get away with a lot of the storytelling, let's just call it that, that you used to do back then if you were, a religious guy,
Also, there's some of that stuff maybe debunking them or a little
Well,
bit.
yeah, I mean, look at Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker. I mean, their whole, I don't know, their whole,
Following.
I mean, like they had a massive following.
Wow.
It just completely collapsed.
Wow, it's interesting.
Infidelity to all of the stuff that they preached against,
Yeah.
they were heavily involved in. So,
So you went there,
yep.
and then you said you got to get out of there.
Yep.
So what did you do? Did you leave before you got your bachelor's?
Oh, yeah. I left about a year and a half in.
Okay.
Spoke to Coach Rich Draper at Bowling Green State University back in Ohio, and decided to transfer and swim for them.
What events did you swim?
The breaststroke was my best. The 100 and 200 breast. Also swam the individual medley, but 100 and 200 breast were mine.
I can't swim. I mean, I can swim, but I have no efficiency. Yeah. So I did like a triathlon maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it was my second. It was one of the mini triathlons or whatever they call them, the shorter versions.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I swam, it was like 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And on the next time I swam, same distance, half mile, it was like 45 minutes. It was like I was just.
It's all technique, Tony.
60% of my energy is fighting.
That's it.
Going forward, it's like I'm more concerned about staying up than I am.
Yeah.
And then when I was swimming this second time I went, I remember I was curious. I was literally like almost all the way out, and then there's a point where you turn around and you come back in.
Yep.
And I said, well, I wonder how deep it is. And I literally stood up. It was like my knee, the height of my knees. And there was this rescue boat right next to me. And he started laughing, and I jumped back under the water. And I was worried because I'm not a good swimmer. I was worried that that I was going to get kicked in the face, or that some of the good swimmers are going to swim right over me. But it was actually the opposite. I was the predator.
You were doing the kicking and the flailing.
I was like, nobody could touch me. I just was slow, and so I made it through. And but it's funny because my daughter's such a good swimmer, and now
how did that happen?
So I wish I could swim better and do more of those triathlons. So you did that. Did you do any other curricular activities or?
Just played baseball, I pitched, so
okay.
That was, I actually loved the pitching more than I loved the swimming because I wasn't expected to be the best in the country, right? Pitching, so I really had fun.
It was more of a team.
It was, I could really just enjoy it and not have the expectation.
Right.
So that was a good extracurricular, kind of like to weigh the balance.
Yeah.
It was ultra competitive, but also just enjoyed the fun of the sport.
It's so intimidating.
Yeah.
Pitching and having that ball come at you.
Well, to be quite honest, it comes here, in the brain. You have to know who you're pitching against, where their weaknesses are. It's all strategy. I guess, Kurt Schilling was probably the master of that.
Yeah.
He had notebooks stacked, on every single person.
He was such a character. He would
was, man. Wow.
He'd wake up late and then just eat Elio's pizza.
Yeah, he was not a specimen of health.
And that was his best meat. It was his best process for preparing for the game.
Babe Ruth and hot dogs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then he was a character. You never hear from him anymore.
No, I think he got into trouble with that. Sports. Was it like a sports?
Some startup.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't go over too well.
Right.
The investors weren't happy or something like that.
Yeah, that's the last I heard.
Yeah.
That's fun. I liked baseball when I was younger. I played, and but I didn't get the right, I guess, mentoring to kind of get me through some of the kind of lack of team spirit,
Yeah.
kind of, criticizing, kind of quasi-bullying that was going on.
Yeah.
And I didn't really push through that. And then I tried soccer when I was in high school, and then I quit. I regret quitting. So long story short, I ended up getting in martial arts in college, and then I stayed on it, never quit.
Nice.
But same thing. I didn't particularly get along with the kids, and they were like, it was like a little, like I felt like there was a little bit of bullying, a little bit of attitude.
Yeah.
But I didn't push through
I see.
to where you get that. Everybody learns how to accept each other, and you learn how to be a team.
Right.
I didn't get that.
Never got to that part.
Yeah, and I don't know if the coaches would have facilitated that, or if there was a lack of leadership.
Coaches do that.
I don't know how much of that was me versus whether there wasn't enough mentorship to kind of push us through that.
I think it's probably the coaches. I mean, a lot of coaches, are looking just to win and not looking to develop, young men.
That's a problem. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I see that a lot. I mean, I've seen it with my kids growing up. Growing up, they all, did multiple sports and, eventually settled on swimming. But, all the way through middle school, they played baseball, they played lacrosse, they did everything. And it really does come down to, who really takes an interest in developing a team culture.
And if you get a good coach,
Oh my goodness, yeah.
it's huge.
They emphasize that, like our coach, he takes the kids to retreats, where they have to do team building, activities. Forget the name of the place, but there's one that they specifically go to, and they organize all of these team building, and they have, guest speakers who explain what they're doing and why they're doing it. So, I mean, it starts with the coach.
Have you ever coached?
I have. I coached a high school team for about a year, I'd say.
Baseball team?
No, swim team.
Swim team?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot of fun because we did all of those sorts of things. We played putt.
Yeah.
We went to movies,
It's interesting
war
because you don't realize looking in from the outside looking, you don't realize how much of a team sport it is.
Oh my God. Well, see,
It seems individual, but there really is a lot of team.
especially as you're growing, up. Those kids, they're not swimming because they want to become Olympians. They're swimming because it's social. Right. They're with their friends, their buddies. That's their crew.
Yeah, they encourage each other.
And they joke around, they blow bubbles in their water. I mean, they're silly. At the same time, they're working out, So, if you take any of those coaching classes, which is what I love about USA Swimming, they make you take all of the courses and you learn about that side of coaching.
Have you ever been exposed to tennis, the culture of tennis?
Played tennis at the local club, but not,
Because I was speaking to a coach that's around here. He coaches one of the girls' teams, high school team.
Mm-hmm.
But he was saying it wasn't as much of, at least from a coaching perspective, there wasn't as much of a team.
No, that's a lot like the figure skating. My youngest, she was really, really good figure skater, and she skated out of the club of Boston,
Wow.
in Boston, but they just had that accident in the airplane that crashed. She knew the girls that,
Oh, God.
and the coaches that were on that plane. She'd worked with them, and, that's why she ended up gravitating towards swimming. She took second at the national competition, in her age group, and we thought maybe she was going to pursue it, but she just said it's too lonely.
Wow.
Yeah, she just said that it's just you on the ice and listening to the coach, and most often they're telling you what you're not doing well. It's not in a bad way, but she's like, there was never anything that was encouraging, about it. I guess if you're a perfectionist, then maybe that's a good sport for you,
Yeah, there needs to be. Well, I teach and coach martial arts, and it's individual, but it's not competitive against each other. You encourage everybody to grow to their fullest potential.
That's
and
the same way.
And you teach empathy. It's about if you're hurting each other, then you're not able to grow. You might inflict pain on each other.
There's a difference. Between pain and hurt.
I actually tell the kids, I have like literally 8 and 9 year olds, and I explain to them, does this hurt? Yes. But are you hurt? No.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if you get this hit in the stomach, or if you get like this certain thing, like if you're doing a sit up, it hurts, right? Yeah. But can you do more? Yeah. Are you trying your best? No. Why? Because it hurts, right? But are you hurt? No. Like you know what I mean?
It's true.
Yeah. So they learn And I'm like, I can't make you do it. You have to figure out, decide to push yourself. And if you get injured, then I want you to know you're injured to let me know and stuff.
Absolutely.
But learning what that is, and I said, that's the way everything in life's going to be. Because if you're uncomfortable, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's definitely not a bad thing.
And that's what that's what we teach them. So, but it's together, we're all together. And then if you're sparring, you're fighting with each other, like one kid was whacking the other kid and hurting him. And I'm like, they need to trust you.
Right.
And I need to trust you, because if you're hurting one of my students, then I can't trust you. They can't trust you. So you need to learn how to not, how to trust each other, and how to empathize, how to understand what it's like. So it's actually ironic. I don't think people realize how much you learn how to empathize and care about other people.
There's a huge
through studying violence.
Yes,
it's so counterintuitive, but yeah.
That's good.
That's good. So you went. So you went to college. You changed colleges.
Yeah.
And what were you studying at the time?
So my first degree was in finance. So I thought I wanted to work on Wall Street. That was my very first. I entered a contest nationally with a couple of my students and colleagues. And we won the Merrill. Well, we didn't win. We took third place in the Merrill Lynch, investment. So like you invest in stocks over a period of 6 months, and whoever ended up with the most money at the end, we had the third best. So I was really, really into finance. Worked for a bank. Helped them develop an algorithm to take the money that was sitting in the vaults and then invest in short-term, investments, so that they're not just wasting that money. Thought that I was in line to become the treasurer of that bank.
Really?
And they just...
So you graduated college and were now working, and then how long were you working?
Yeah, so worked at the bank for about three and a half years. And then
thought you were in line
passed up like twice. And it was the president and no offense, their lead attorney, both our sons graduated like a year after I did.
I love attorneys, except for the ones I don't like.
So they get outstanding positions, and they weren't the brains.
They're all awesome except for the ones that aren't.
Yeah, that's right. Same thing with doctors. Same thing with we're all
So
got passed up twice, and then I said I'm going to do something that I don't have to rely on someone else awarding me a position. And I figured best was that. So I did pre-med, and I said I'm going to take classes the first semester. If I can get straight A's in physics and organic chemistry, then I think I've got it.
So you had to go back to pre-med, which is getting another bachelor degree?
Not a bachelor's. You just had to meet all the prereqs.
So many courses.
Yeah,
so you had
for medical school. Yeah.
And where did you go to take those courses?
Youngstown State, right? My old hometown.
Oh, okay.
So came back to
And then you got the prerequisites, and then you went to medical school.
Yeah, applied to medical school, got accepted, and then, that was just like, I can't tell you how much I, in some ways, regret going to medical school. And because you pour your entire life, like I never watched television, couldn't, because you're studying that much.
There's a lot of cramming of...
there's a statistic that says that you forget in 1 week more than most people learn their entire lifetime.
Yeah.
That's how much information you're pouring into your head. And then whenever you come out, that's when the HMOs were just starting to get started, and you went from an average physician making $1.5 million to $2 million a year down to maybe $200,000 a year.
Really, that fast?
That fast.
That's crazy.
The malpractice insurance went skyrocketing.
When was that?
That was back in the early 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, early mid 90s. Just awful. I mean, anyone can look at the stats now, and you'll see that the average internal medicine physician is bringing in about 185.
And now there's even more changes with after Obamacare, and then there's telemedicine, but
now AI,
and then you have physicians assistants and practitioners. So you have
like a nurse anesthetist will actually make more than the anesthesiologist.
And then you also have, it seems to me, I don't know if I'm right, but it seems like the amount of siloing of experts is increasing.
It is.
Where like if you have anything regarding any particular part of your body, you can get a referral.
But nobody talks to each other.
Right.
That's the other problem because of those silos. No one talks to each other.
And then it's hard to get to see some of the doctors among the specialists. Because if it's a good specialist,
they're booked.
They might not take your insurance.
Yes.
They might not take your insurance, and they might not be accepting new patients.
Oh, that's huge.
So,
I mean, when one doctor retires, that's like the worst thing that can happen to you as the patient, because now you have to try to find another person.
Yes.
And try to find one that has an established, physician that's knowledgeable, stays up with, the current, medical procedures and things. That's really hard to find because they're not taking new patients.
No, it's a problem. It's not an easy system. And you spend so much in insurance that if you were able to literally just give that money to the doctor, you could probably, and pay for
look at the orthopedics.
Pay for your own MRI once in a while. You could probably spend less money.
Yeah, the orthopedics used to only do surgeries like hip replacements, knee replacements in hospitals, but they're only getting 10 to 12% of the money that's being paid by the patient. So now they have all these ASCs, that they set up outside of the hospitals, and they're where they get 50, 60% of the money. So they're,
I wonder what I don't know. I have some friends who are physical therapists, and they say that the commoditization of that practice is really bad. Like they really don't make a lot.
No, they don't. That's why everyone's leaving, to be quite honest. Yeah, and you want to be social influencers. More money than physicians.
Well, there's an interesting side to that. A lot of the people that are social influencers aren't really social influencers. There's a big movement toward service and product providers creating their own direct relationships using social media and YouTube and all that with their customers, more special customer base. So they're not just using mass media and just advertising, or even advertising on Facebook and all those things. They're creating direct relationships. Have you seen there's some MDs that are really big now. There's one woman named Fonda Wright. Have you seen her stuff?
I didn't see her now.
So she was a cancer nurse. Then she got her MD, and she was an orthopedic surgeon.
Wow.
And at some point, I don't know the whole story, but at some point, I think it might have been when she hit menopause, she realized that she had frozen shoulder, and she was having trouble getting the right treatment.
Yeah.
As a patient who was an MD, who had the experience that she has, so then she started looking into it and studying it, and then so she started helping patients with like hormone replacement therapy, how to deal with all these issues. Then she was actually involved with research involving muscle and how big your muscles are, and then how that relates to longevity and a lot of the issues. So she's very active on social media, on podcasts. There's another guy, he actually did finance for a while, and he's got an engineering degree from an undergrad engineering degree from Canada somewhere. His name is Peter Tia.
Okay.
So I have his book on longevity related stuff. Same thing though. Like he kind of goes on about the misinformation or the kind of scaring that certain headlines gave regarding hormone replacement therapy, saying that it could lead to increase in rates of cancer, and he just really thinks it's unfortunate because a lot of people have not had the advantage of that because they thought that it was bad for you.
Right.
And then he has this whole program, so he has patients that he sees, but part of what he does is he says you need to lift weights, you need to do this.
Absolutely.
So it's not just, so he calls it 2.0 instead of 1.0 or 3.0.
Right.
Like he's got instead of
more holistic.
Yeah. So there are these doctors that are learning and studying and looking at all the studies, things that they didn't learn in medical school.
Right.
Because they had to learn it.
Well, there's only so many hours in a day for the medical schools to teach you what you needed to know to practice.
Right. And so what they're doing is they're doing a podcast, they're doing a social media, and they're developing direct relationships and then getting their clients. So they're not relying on being affiliated with, a big hospital or something like that.
Yeah.
So they're probably able to make better money.
Well, I think, potential patients appreciate that more.
Totally.
Because now you've got someone who's interested in you and that can give you the kind of information that you're looking for as a patient.
I'm hopeful that the model's going to change.
Yeah.
And you're going to get, that patients are going to get more direct access to the doctors they want.
Yeah.
Which in theory is what the American system's supposed to be about.
Right.
And it seems like we're getting away from that more and more.
Yeah. Well, I think, with the company that I actually talked to you about to its we had a division of that kind of tapped into telemedicine. And this was back before telemedicine was even really thought. We worked with South Shore Hospital, and it was about something as simple as, let's say you have a mom or dad that's in Seattle and, you can't be there and they just had a knee replacement and, they need to go in for a checkup to look at the wound sites, right? Well, why can't you get on a Zoom live and be able to have someone with a GoPro or some other, even their phone camera, inspecting the knee at the same time that you're on the call and, the physician or the nurse is saying, this looks infected or no, that looks good, that don't worry about that tissue.
Because you happen to live in a different state.
Right. You can actually communicate and coordinate the health and have a better, outcome, by allowing people to communicate live. And then all of that was recorded.
Right.
In the medical records.
That's a great idea.
So that was something we were before our time.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they allow that. I know that there's some issues from a liability perspective where they probably don't want to do that.
There's certain things that they can't do, but now there's a lot of telemedicine.
True. I know there's definitely telemedicine.
Yeah.
But in terms of having a family member who can't be there watch and then
it's all, privileges or rights, that the patient sets up. Here's my proxy.
I worked on
going to be my advocate.
I worked on a patent application for Xerox related to something along those lines to try to get using technology, deal with the privacy permissions, and then give someone access.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you got your medical degree, you practiced for a while under the HMO system.
Yeah, did not like that at all. I actually didn't like the patients.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you how that happens, because you have to have a certain turnover.
Where were you practicing?
In Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
So you have to have a certain turnover of patients to be profitable, right? So even some practices would actually have a lighting system in all of the rooms. The light would turn green when you were supposed to start interacting, engaging, and it would turn yellow whenever you were supposed to be wrapping it up, and then red whenever you were supposed to get them out of the office, because the margins were so thin, right? And so you're spending time, you don't get to spend time with the patients that you really felt like you needed to as much, but then you would have, say you're on call every fourth night, for the practice, so someone needs orders written, you have to go to the hospital to see the patient, write the orders. Well, you'd get the same 400 pounds, diabetic who smokes, that doesn't take their meds like they're supposed to, doesn't watch their insulin levels. And you're getting called at 2-3 o'clock in the morning on a regular basis by the same people who won't do anything to improve their situation. So, after a while, then when the kids start coming, you start to say, who do I want to spend my time with?
When your kids come. Yeah.
When my kids start coming, who do I want to spend my time with?
Yeah.
Right? Am I going to miss dance recitals? Am I going to miss baseball games? Am I going to miss the opportunity to be a coach, an assistant coach for these individuals?
Right.
No. Right. And that's whenever my interest really started. I always loved teaching. That was always, I don't think a lot of people teach, right? The collegiate level, you don't have to have any educational degree or experience to teach. You just have to have a master's.
Okay.
So how does what's in your head translate to someone who's in the class learning when you've never been taught how to teach?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, it is interesting. It's okay. So but at first you just started teaching.
Yeah, and I loved it. I mean, like you would help
But then you
medical
started looking
students
at,
and-
but then you started looking into the aspect of how you teach,
yes.
and then looking at that, and then
Yeah, what is effective teaching? In science, you learn that, concept associations mean everything, right? So even when you use a mnemonic, let's say, never let monkeys eat bananas. That's neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Those are all the white blood cells that we have in order of their most frequent numbers, right? So, but you're taking something that's routine, you've heard before, and then you attach additional information to it. So you use concept associations to teach from. So you talked about osteoporosis. You look at, a building and you say, if it's a skyscraper, Sears Tower can sway, 3 to 5 feet during the highest winds. Why doesn't it crumble to the ground? Or why doesn't the Transamerica building in, San Francisco crumble to the ground? Because it has both concrete and steel. Steel gives it the flexibility, concrete gives it the stability. So you start with that concept, and then you tell the students the calcium is like the concrete, cement, and the collagen, which is your protein, gives the bone its flexibility so it doesn't snap and doesn't become brittle. And then you take it one step further and say, if you have osteoporosis or you have rickets, which one of those components is missing, and how do you, treat the patient or help them avoid those diseases based on what's missing. But it all started with that first concept that they understood.
okay,
Right. And you build off of that. But most educators just read from a PowerPoint.
right.
And the students are expected to read on their own, look it up online, watch a video on YouTube. It's just
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been teaching martial arts for a number of years. I taught science for a couple of years ago, to 8th graders, and it was frustrating. I didn't really like the curriculum. There were some aspects I liked about it.
they're mostly check boxes, to be quite honest. I mean, curriculum is all about, or has been, about check boxes, right? Even when it comes to something like my kids are elite swimmers, and you teach something like buoyancy, the lungs, and you probably experienced this whenever you were doing your mini tries. Your lungs fill with air, and you go underwater, you're going to float to the surface, right? Well, if you're a swimmer and you push off of the wall, you should push downwards first, so that the buoyancy is going to lift you back up to the top. But if you use dolphin kicks, as you're lifting back up to the top, you're going to be accelerating to the surface.
Oh, okay.
But see, nobody teaches that.
Nobody told me that.
No, that's what I mean. It's little stuff like that if you
As an
explain.
engineer right away, I'm thinking that's a lot easier for me to understand.
So, Mr. Engineer, how about whenever you kick, let's say the breaststroke kicks like a frog and the legs come back together, you should make sure that your toes point, right? Because if they're open, what happens? You get a swirl behind you that pulls you backwards.
Yeah,
right?
nobody told me that either.
No one tells you that. So these are all the things that the elite swimmers, they're the ones who've been told. But all of the kids who are wanting to be the elite swimmers never get there because they don't know. Right. So it's all about how you teach.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are critical things.
It doesn't matter the topic, right? It can be, swimming isn't going to save a life necessarily, but.
Well, I write patent applications for clients, and I've litigated patents for clients, but it's the same thing where you've got to teach what's important or critical or essential.
That's right.
And you got to get that idea across, and then you got to get it across so that patent examiner understands it, but then so that a judge understands it.
That's right.
And then so the jury understands it.
Absolutely.
And they all have to tie, and then another attorney has to understand it, and then the inventors have to be all on the same page. So you all kind of like connect, right? And then you have to describe what you own. And that definitely has to describe the essence of what it is. That's right. Because if it's got irrelevant stuff that the inexperienced swimmers are dealing with, then that patent's never going to describe what's in the market. That's right. Because they're going to do something different, and they don't have to do it the way you say it. That's right. So yeah, that's cool. So you started getting interested in that, and then is that what So were you already teaching? How many classes?
Yeah, I started teaching just a few adjunct courses just for, fun.
So you were getting your medical practice still?
Yeah,
And then teaching adjunct courses?
Teaching adjunct courses. And then I had one of the publishers at that point in time. It wasn't all digital, but it was all print. But they would come in and look for new potential authors, for their textbooks. And they always wanted someone who was, their sweet spot was between 40 and 45 because they're mature enough, they've been around long enough, they have enough reputation. And they would just come in and listen to you, to teach. And then they would, if they earmarked you as somebody that they thought, wow, that's an interesting way to teach. If you could put that into print, we could sell that. And so that's when they started talking to me, and I said, well, I can do that. I said, but I don't think that's the future of publishing. I said, I think at some point, and this was way back in 2003, 2004, I said, you give us those little CD-ROMs in the back of the book. I said, but those are useless. And they said, why? There's a lot of good stuff there. I said, number one, it's all passive learning. There's nothing engaging the student. I said, number two, the students would have to email all of their results to their quizzes or their assignments to you. So if you're teaching like I taught at Boston College and you have 200 students, you want 200 emails for every assignment? No, you want it to auto-grade, right? And then you can cover the material if there's a glaring weakness somewhere. So I helped McGraw-Hill build the first auto-graded assignments in the history of higher ed.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so we did that. And then that was, Eris was their first product that we offered that. And of course, nobody was really interested because everyone was still writing on chalkboards and, just wanted to lecture, publish or perish. So they weren't really interested in, the digital side of things.
Yeah.
But
eventually took on.
Yeah, because, when you started saying, I can make your life easier. Well, how much time do you spend, how many TAs do you have to hire to make these papers? And then that's pretty interesting. Yep. Yeah. But that's where it'll start.
Oh, that's cool. So you had is that what led into, well, so that was your relationship with McGraw-Hill, some of the projects you worked on with them.
Yep.
And then, at what point did you start teaching more and doing less?
That's whenever McGraw-Hill started, they said, wow, this is really starting to take off.
Yeah.
We're interested in, seeing what you can do in your specialty, elaborating on that. And so we started building, some of the interactives, drag and drop activities versus, just multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank. We started using imagery, leader lines, movable items on the screen, kinesthetic activities, basically. And so we started putting that out into the field, and everyone loved it, because it was just a great way. You couldn't get lab time to look at cadavers.
So when you were doing that, was there a point at which you just stopped doing the medical practice?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the turning point.
Oh, so once you started working on that more,
when I started working on that, I just said, I'm going to switch gears here.
And were you already working as an adjunct at Bunker Hill, or was it?
Yeah. That Bunker Hill had a full-time position that came available, I'd say maybe 2 years after I started teaching adjunct, and then they offered me the position, and I just dove it head first.
You've been full-time with them since?
Yeah, ever since.
Nice. Okay.
About 2005, I think, is when that.
Wow. So you were telling me, all right, before we get, so how many business ventures have you been involved with?
Let's see. Tuatara was the first. That was, one of the first ones that you and I, talked about. We had a business venture where we were buying a school. I was a dean that program. And then Tuatara came, and then we had another venture where we were basically working with medical device companies to train surgeons to use these medical devices. And they would use cadaver tissue to practice, basically, right? And so we opened up a 20,000 square foot facility down in Fall River. And so we launched that. That was right before COVID, which, was a challenge because we were building out, the 5th floor, 6th floor primary care. it was, tough because of the conditions.
People couldn't access
They
it.
couldn't even have workers there for long.
Did that affect your continued involvement with that venture?
No, we saw it all the way through. We started working with companies like Laerdal to train, using the mannequins because it was easier to use those for training. But then, once COVID started clearing up, we started getting a lot more activity.
Okay.
With the surgeons, wanting to come in and practice knee replacements using these robotic devices. So that took off, doing pretty well. And then, just the commute for me back and forth to Fall River got to be a little, very much. So we, my business partner that I'm with now, we sold we sold our shares.
Okay.
We started MedEd Authors, where we will build, training modules, all on LMSs, learning management systems.
Okay.
To show competency, basically. So if you, let's say you were, a nursing student and you needed to learn how to do blood pressures, then you could do that. You wanted to learn how to insert Foley catheters. We would have all of those activities, online so that they could practice them online and then go to
virtually.
Virtually, and then go to the facility and do them hands-on, and that would go into their portfolio.
Okay.
So that, companies like Arias Medical would say, we need someone who can do these 5 procedures, right? Mm-hmm. And they had those in their portfolio. So they could, show that to Arias Medical and they would say, okay, we feel comfortable.
Was part of your extended resume, so to speak, to get a job?
Yep.
All right. Okay.
So
you're still doing that?
Still doing that.
Yep. Thanks. And then you were telling me, you're telling about your kids and how they're so active in swimming.
Yeah.
And then you were telling me a little bit about name, image, and likeness and how.
Oh my gosh, that's
affecting the sports world.
And I can't say it any better.
I'm still confused. Still confused about how, like you were telling me. So let me see if I can, at least from my own brain standpoint, put some context in this. So your daughter is your oldest?
Yeah.
And she's swimming.
She's swimming at UMaine, and her life is good because of Title IX. So Title IX basically says that if you have 100 male scholarships, you have to find a way to give 100 female scholarships. Well, there's no female football teams that have 100.
Oh, okay. Right? So, all right. So there's a certain number of scholarships that the college gives out,
mm-hmm.
right? And because of Title IX, and because she's a girl,
mm-hmm.
there's less competition for those scholarships that they have to give out for girls
or abundant
for female athletes at the college. What I don't understand is, why wasn't this an issue before name, image, and likeness changes? Because
yes,
at the time, before the kids had a right to benefit from their name, image, and likeness in a collegiate atmosphere.
Yeah.
There was a change in the law, I guess 2013, 2015. There was a case that came out that led to a change in this. But even before that, there was still only so much money,
right,
and only so many scholarships.
That was fine.
But why wasn't there an issue? Okay, so let me complete the story. So your daughter's fine.
Mm-hmm.
She's swimming. She gets a scholarship.
Yep.
A swimming scholarship. Mm-hmm. But your son, who is a junior in high school.
Yeah, Olympic qualifier. No scholarship.
No scholarship opportunities for him because he's not a basketball player or a football player.
That's right. Because the majority of the squads, think about what is the roster size for football?
Right. So, well, even if, I mean, if you do the math, but the bottom line is that there's more money in basketball and football.
Exactly.
And so the priority is to give the scholarships to that program.
Well, no, it's not the scholarships. It's the cost of what they have to pay out of their profits to the NIL individuals.
No, I know, but I'm just trying to establish the baseline here. So
yeah.
So So there's so much money available,
Yeah.
right? And then from that money, they're going to use some of that money for scholarships for the kids.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Regardless of whether their name, image, and likeness is involved or not.
Yeah.
Right. So your son is experiencing the situation where there aren't scholarships available to him right now because he's a swimmer and there's not as much money involved in swimming.
It's right. It's
For whatever reason, how the math works or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, if you go back in time before 2000, whenever that case came out and before the changes, you still had a certain amount of money in football, basketball, a lot more money, and you still had less money in swimming.
But
So why wasn't...
Look at the profit margins still, Tony. You say that if you were paying scholarships only to the football players and you had a certain number, let's call it 50, and the scholarship was worth, $50,000 a year, that's what you had to pay the athletes. But now, from the profits that you make on those football games and the sales of jerseys and, ticket revenues, whatever it is, they have to give a certain percentage of that to
the students,
to the student athletes, right?
So they're paying more than they were paying before.
Right. And so what these individuals say that run the colleges is those programs and those minor sports, they're not bringing in any revenue, but we still have to get them scholarships at $50K a year.
Yeah.
Why don't we cut those programs and take the $50K times 30 swimmers, right? And use that to pay these NIL people so that we have a bigger margin at the end of the day.
Okay. So, interesting. So if you go back in time, it's before the change. For whatever reason, they allotted scholarships for these, because they were still lesser paying sports.
Yeah.
Or for whatever reason, they allotted money for those scholarships. And for now, because of the increased monetary pressures, which name, image, and likeness seems to be impacting on, there's less opportunity for these other sports.
Right. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul in a sense.
But there is a right. Those amateur players do have a right to try to get compensated for their name, image, and likeness if they, through social media or through some organizing kind of banded together and they can get people to pay to come watch them swim or something. They could.
Yeah.
Theory. So they still have that additional right that they didn't have before. But what you're saying is that the net impact or the big picture impact on them now is that they have less with the...
You're going to lop off.
With the name, image, and likeness rights that they have less than they would have had under the earlier system.
Well, think about the competition now. You have schools like Florida that had 45 swimmers, male swimmers on their team. They're now required to drop down to 22. And that means freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, a total of 22.
Why? Because so they don't have to give out like scholarships.
Exactly. So what do you say to all of the kids who are in high school now that are looking for an opportunity to compete at the next level to make the Olympics? The competition is so fierce and the positions are so few that
why do they
waste their time?
Why do they not have enough money? So they just don't have the spectators and the funding, like the money generation.
Yeah, the money generation
is
what they're really saying. They want the model to change for basically they're making collegiate sports profession sports.
Yeah,
that's the way they're treating them now.
But which is fine, but I just don't understand why there isn't enough money, at least.
Well, there's enough money, Tony.
Yeah,
but
why
the margins are dropping.
Why the incentives are such that they're not able to at least give basic compensation to these other sports. It's a really interesting competition within the same college or the same university.
Yeah, and it's going to have such detrimental impact, let's say, for Olympics, because Olympics have a lot.
It's going to affect the overall sport.
Take tennis, take volleyball, any of those sports. They're all minor sports. They don't have a great spectator.
But what if you play cricket?
That's what I mean. Yeah. Maybe here you won't make any money, but worldwide.
So it's really an issue. So you would think that swimming in general is concerned about this,
They are.
and they would be trying to do something about it.
They are. And I don't know if you've seen it, but they've had like the SEC championships was all televised finally.
Oh, okay.
And, you could pay through ESPN Plus to watch it. They had a couple invite meets, where you brought the big powerhouses together and people would fly in to see those meets. I mean, so they're finding ways to monetize the sport, but it's like peeing, in the ocean. Are you going to raise an inch?
You had soccer, like in the States, trying to break through, and it took forever for them to finally become a professional sport or begin.
And how much money is it making?
I don't know how they're doing, but it's not like the NFL.
And take female sports, same way. You look at the WNBA. One of their margins, they're razor thin.
Yeah.
They're probably losing money. So it's like, what do? Do you sacrifice all of those sports just because they're not making money?
It's a problem. Yeah.
It's almost like saying, let's stop having nature reserves because they're not making money, and let's put condos on there and sell them. You see what I mean? Like there's a cost associated.
There's a sacrifice that you have to bear. It's like inner city. Like, why should we make sure that the inner city has everything they need, or has access to better food, or access to better grocery stores, and better programs, better help with schooling, better schooling, better access to schooling. Why should we do that? Because when we have all of this money concentrated in this other part of town, it's kind of a similar effect, right?
Why do you save animals then, right?
Yeah.
Why do you, have endangered species? Who cares if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
They're not making money. That land that they're living on is just wide open and could be used for something much more profitable.
Or it's like it's even like the situation in California when they made a decision to port all the water to the ocean. Like why spend this money on this? Like the incentives were weird, right? Like the long term.
You got to think about the motivation.
The long term benefits to preserving this water body were really significant if you consider the drying and the fire risks that ended up basically decimating LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting issue, and it's ironic that these rights are the kids' rights.
Yeah.
But
which kids' rights?
Well,
that's the
they're all of their rights. But what I'm saying is that
you can say that
you have a corporatized top-down structure that's really benefiting and manipulating what's happening with this. Right. There's something to that I'd like to dig into and learn more about.
Wouldn't you think? In my mind, I think that the NCAA is ticked off because of this NIL, because it took money out of their pockets. And so to
make up for that,
to almost like in a mean sense, is they're going to say, okay, let's put it this way.
It's retribution?
In some ways, I believe it is. I believe it is. I believe that they were so used to controlling the funds that they had and doing what they wanted with those funds. And now all of a sudden they're being forced. Their hand has been forced.
Yeah. No, it's messed up. It's, my son's a tattoo artist in Fort Lauderdale, and
Did he do yours?
Yeah, he did.
Nice.
My wall.
He did a nice job.
And the birds, that represents my daughter. It's
nice.
The ones he just did within the last month.
He's really good.
Yeah, he's really good. But some of his clients are professional sports players.
Yep.
Like the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA. And then some of his clients are collegiate, like college level athletes.
Yeah.
As he said that some of the college level athletes are doing better than let's say the NFL.
Yeah.
Because of the school that they're at, and they're doing really well. Like they get really good money. which is interesting. I don't know if he was exaggerating or if it was, but it was interesting how he mentioned that.
Well, I mean, again, when you think about retribution, you think about things like, if you tax the rich, do you think they're going to keep their prices the same?
No, I think...
Why would they raise the prices?
Right. Yeah, they're going to raise the prices.
And that's the same thing that's happening here, is that, you're just shifting, money and taking it from one place to supply it to another.
But is it the NCAA or are the colleges and universities involved as well?
They're all involved, because the NCAA puts down the mandate and says, hey, the legal matter says, and you have to abide it. And so the NCAA says, we're not going to take this line down.
Oh, right? So they figure out ways
around it to shift. And
so tell me this. So that's a problem that your son has to really figure out.
It's huge.
That's an issue. And it's for some reason your fault that he's swimming and let him know to score. I don't know why. You didn't say that.
I begged him to play baseball.
You didn't say that. You said that you begged him to, but it's in the genes, maybe. I don't know.
It could. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the sad part of it, because you think, in what world before this past year would a kid who just turned 16, he hadn't even been 16 for a month, made Olympic trials, but now is struggling to find a spot?
And the Olympic system is
so hard.
It's a similar problem before NIL, and be careful what you ask for, because it might get worse
it's going to get worse.
Because in the Olympics, they don't get paid crap.
No.
And in some sports, you do get endorsements after you win.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a problem in the Olympics. You don't get, there's so much money involved within that.
Absolutely.
But the athletes don't get it.
No.
And so even if he makes the Olympics, he's still going to have that problem there.
Exactly.
And
it's a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. But he's badass.
He is. That he is.
And that's all that matters. He's badass. No, that's pretty cool. So the other thing I was thinking about was, and I don't know if you think this is relevant, but so you got the universities, the colleges are really worried about their financial situation.
Right.
Some of them are worried about their existence.
Sure.
I would imagine, speculate, but some of them are going away.
Not the power schools, though.
Not the power schools,
right.
but there are a lot of universities concerned about their continued financial position, and even some of the ones with the big endowments and stuff, they seem to make sure that they're always making money. Yeah. And have you seen, I just feel like my daughter, when she went to Yale, I felt like this was the case. My other son went to Florida State. There seems to be a lot of upselling.
Oh yeah.
Like when I went to school, me and all my friends, every once in a while, one of us would maybe fail the class or had to take a class over the summer.
Right.
But now students are told, go study abroad over the summer, or take classes over the summer in addition to what you're doing. Or when my son went to Florida State, you'll have a better chance of getting accepted if you accept the summer program. Yeah. If you sign up for the summer program, so you're not just going in the fall.
Right.
But you got to pay extra for the summer program.
Absolutely.
And by the way, if you go 5 years instead of 4, you can get a master's.
That's right.
And by the way, instead of just getting a regular law degree, you can get the specialized law degree. And then, and by the way, everybody used to just get a bachelor's in electrical engineering, which used to be perfectly enough. And now everybody's got to get a master's or a PhD. It's like this. It's like when you go to buy a coffee. If you're in Italy and you go buy a coffee, and they give you a coffee.
Yeah.
If you want more coffee, you get another coffee.
That's right.
But if you go to Starbucks, they're like, for 10 cents more, you can get this one, and then for 20 cents more, you can get this one, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the colleges are doing that same thing, right?
It's a business. It's not just an educational institution. And I'll tell you, one statement that will change the way you think is that it used to be that, students were being educated, but now the schools see them as a customer. Mm-hmm. They don't see them as someone who needs to be educated anymore. They see them as a customer, and that's where all of the upselling comes, right? I mean, even from dormitories, you should see some of the lavish dormitories that are owned by Michigan State.
And they pay a little bit more for this other one.
A little bit. Mom and dad pay a boatload more, right? You know, so they can have cable, and you can choose which cable package that you want. You know, all through the institution called the college or the university, right?
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
you want your kid to have access to the fitness center.
What?
You know, not the one that's everybody's fitness center, but I mean the one in this one small little village of, you know, high-end rent, right? BU has it. I mean, they...
So anyway, so going back to the other conversation,
Yeah.
it's kind of a related concept in a way. Like, I'm just thinking that it's tied together because it's all about that financial objective
Yes.
and that bottom line,
Absolutely.
and that and it's not the professors that are getting paid more.
No way. Did you see the statistic that just came out last week from the Department of Education? And again, that's another, you know, kettle of fish, but they were talking about how...
That's triggering. You can't say Department of Education.
Yeah, I know. You can't. Because when you look at where all of the money has been going, you look at how many new educators have come into, let's say if you said total number of students versus total number of educators versus total number of administration.
And this is college level educators.
Yeah, higher ed. So that has the administrators has basically quadrupled the number, and the number of educators has stayed the same or dropped. Same thing with the students. You know, we've lost enrollment. So why? Why are there so many more administrators telling each other what needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the majority of the money is going. And that's just not effective, right? You know what I mean?
It's strange. It's really strange. It's the incentives. The incentives are very strange, and I think K through 12 has some similar issues. There are a lot of
Absolutely.
there's a lot of administrators being put in these schools,
Yep.
and the quality of teaching isn't necessarily improving,
It's got the word.
and the control and the pumping in of, like, you got to use this curriculum, and you have to discipline the children in this way, and you have to do this way, isn't really helping the teachers.
Not helping the teachers.
And the teachers aren't making more money.
No, well, think about it. What does the average baseball, football, basketball player make in a salary, right? And compare that to your average teacher, right? Your average teacher.
Yeah.
What are you going to attract? I mean, in Bunker Hill, we just, had some positions, $55,000 a year.
Yeah, no,
How can you survive?
it's a problem. You can't even survive. And then
who's gonna do that?
and then the good teachers who want to stick around are becoming administrators.
That's right.
And I'm like, why can't you just be a good teacher and stay and teach?
Can't make the money to stay alive.
It's a weird system. It's like, it's really strange. The incentives are really strange. And it's not as if there isn't a lot of money going into these systems.
Oh my gosh.
Like-
They need tons of money.
Like a given, even mediocre district in Massachusetts, they must be spending at least $12,000 to $14,000 per student per year.
Easily.
And if you add up all that money, there's plenty of money to pay a decent salary to their teachers.
That's right.
And then and that's not counting all the additional funding for special education,
Right.
because there's tons of money.
Well, imagine
Plenty
the
of money.
applications that you would get from very talented, qualified individuals if you said that the average high school teacher is going to start at $175K a year. And who do you think would be applying now? Right?
Well,
you would get some really, really good qualified individuals.
There's some really weird incentives there too, because you have there's some strange incentives, and this is at the K through 12 and at the collegiate, like higher education level as well, where you have a tradition for forever of not hiring people that actually do shit.
That's right.
You can have somebody in industry, like in my case, like a lawyer who does actually practice and represent clients at the top level. And if I wanted to become a law professor, I couldn't even get an interview.
No.
I spoke to some people at the PhD professor level, including law professors, because I was thinking about this years ago, and they're like, you get no credit for that.
No.
Like, it's as if you're just out of law school.
That's right.
And in fact, you're downgraded. Because you're not looked at. You're not part of the academic community.
Because those who can't do teach usually.
Well, but that's not entirely true as well. I mean, I get that. I get that point because it's funny to put it that way. But I mean, some of these teachers are really hardworking and they're really good teachers.
They are.
But there's this cultural. It's like a double resentment because you think that we can't teach because we don't do, and then so there's like this. It's like a division.
But you do, but you can't teach, right?
Yeah, you do, but you can't teach. So there's this kind of, and the last thing they want, if they're making $50,000, $60,000, maybe $90,000, is they don't want industry people to just come in and make $175,000, right?
Right.
So that's the last thing they want. So it's really interesting how that's all come about. And then you have, you have people that, maybe they don't. They're in this lower, like a socioeconomic class where they don't make as much money, or maybe they have a wealthy husband or a husband that makes better, or spouse, like if you're a guy's teacher, or whatever. I mean, they have and they start teaching at a young age so they build up their retirement.
Yeah.
Because some of the retirement systems are pretty good.
They are.
You get a really high percentage once you retire. So there's that. But there's some really strange incentives. And the administrators are just coming in.
Oh, the administrators are horrible. I mean, I'm not going to say every administrator is horrible because that's not true. But, I mean, to put that much money in administration, you talk about fat, like the fat needs to be trimmed.
It's not about how good the administrators are. Personally, it's about the system itself.
That's right.
And there's something about the system.
Yeah. I mean, they've tried to bridge the gap between, let's say, private sector and higher ed by saying that students need to now have what they call gainful employment, right? Meaning that if you get a degree from, Bunker Hill Community College, a year out, have you been employed? Did your degree mean something to the point where people wanted to hire you? So we have been trying to build liaisons with,
So there's some attention to value. There's some attention to accountability. But there's not attention to the welfare of your assets,
right?
Like your faculty.
Yeah.
Which are pretty important to that.
That's right.
And so, and there's some fighting over resources where that money goes.
Absolutely.
And then it's affecting the sports, like we talked about.
Yeah.
It's affecting the upselling. So, like a given parent has got their kid going to a $60,000 a year school or an $80,000 a year. I mean, some of these schools are really expensive.
Where's the ROI?
Yeah, but that's not enough.
No,
because 6 months into the first year, just after the second year, their son or daughter's like, oh, they really want me to study abroad,
or they want me to get some micro credentials.
I don't even want to know what that is.
Oh my God! So micro credentials are things that they're credentials, but they're not part of your degree.
To pay for that.
So yes. So let's just say that you, weren't going in to be an administrative assistant, but your profession needed you to know how to use Microsoft Outlook, Excel. You could get a micro credential in using those software tools, so that you could put that on your resume.
So you made to take more class over the summer or something?
Yeah, and they charge you $500, $700. It's not like regular tuition, but...
And then they might stay on campus, so they got to pay room and board for the summer.
Yeah. Or even online, they don't have to pay anything, right? I mean, it's a completely asynchronous course, so there's no lectures live. You don't have to log in for Zoom. You just do the activities, and you get this micro credential, and there's lots and lots.
It's like when you go to Walmart, and they're like, "Do you want the protection plan?"
Exactly.
And I'm like, I just spent $10 for this thing. like whatever, or maybe $200 for this thing. Why do I need a protection plan? No, I don't want to.
And the company that provides a protection plan won't even be in business.
Yeah. So it's like that with college. It's like, well, my kid's getting a degree from Yale. Well, that's not enough. You got to get You got to get whatever. And
well, my daughter was looking at schools before she went to Maine. She was Dartmouth, right? Dartmouth was recruiting her. And so we said, what kind of a degree, can she, she was interested mostly in the STEM and the science. And they says, well, a lot of the degrees that we give don't necessarily make you marketable for a job to step out into at the moment that you graduate.
Right.
But we can, guarantee that you get into our master's or our doctorate program, which means again another $90K a year.
Well, think about the psychological effect on the kid.
Yeah.
And then the parents, if the parents are aware of how this might be overkill, then they have to deflate the dreams of their child.
I became the worst person on the face of the planet because she went to Williams. Yeah. Williams, same way. And she loved the campus. She loved the people. She loved the swim team and just couldn't see herself anywhere else but Williams. And then I pulled out the spreadsheet and showed her how much debt she was going to be at the end of 4 years. And you would have thought that like I was Darth Vader and she was Luke Skywalker. Right?
No, and a lot of our friends and colleagues our age will literally like just pay it or tell you should pay it, and
I won't do it.
And there's just different views across the spectrum. And I have a friend who was telling me recently, like, she's like, she went to college, she has all this debt.
Yeah.
She's telling her kids, you don't have to go to college.
Right.
Like you could do a trade, you could do.
Oh my God, those plumbers and electricians are killing it.
Tattoo artists, like
absolutely.
Yeah, he's
killing it.
Totally. Do you want to take a? So my new thing is we just got back from a break. Is there's a lot of politics going on right now, and there's a lot of passion on
sure
on both sides of our political system, and then you have people in the middle that really don't care. But my thing is, I try to be like Switzerland. I read on, like my theory is I try to tell I used to tell my daughter this, tell my kids this, like we just need to give less craps. Like we need to give less fucks.
That's right.
And then enjoy life. Like when we were younger, like I was working in DC when I went down there in 87, so I was working in there from 87 until 2002. Wow. But I mean, you had Republicans marrying Democrats.
Yeah.
You had,
what's this polarized?
You had like DC was liberal. You had Maryland I think Maryland was like a different type of liberal, and then Virginia everybody was conservative.
Right.
But we all had different opinions. I had a friend who voted for Ross Perot.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't divisive, right?
No.
Yeah. So it wasn't divisive, but now it's like if you have the wrong politics, it's oh my God.
You can't even miss.
So what I like to do is when someone posts something that has the opposite political view that I have, or maybe it's actually usually the opposite factual view.
Yeah.
I like to point out something that's valid in what they posted, and then make a joke about it. And they think I'm totally on the side that they're on.
Supporting them 100%.
But my point is that let's just laugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can actually support your fact, even though I disagree with it, and then use it to make a joke.
Yeah.
And then further it to the next step. Like I just think that's good energy. Well, you know what I mean?
I think that's why Ronald Reagan was so popular. Even Mondale laughed, at some of his jokes. I mean, they asked him one time. They said, "How did your meeting go with, Prime Minister Tutu?" And he said, "So." Like he just had this, way of taking the edge off, and basically saying, hey, let's just be real people. Sometimes.
No.
So let's not forget that.
Because there was something I saw the other day, and this touched a little bit upon some kind of health issues, right? It's everybody's I happen to like RFK.
I do too. Yeah.
And but I've met people that really got upset when they found that out, and they felt a personal obligation to kind of teach me why that was a bad thing. And initially it was, well, if you support RFK and you vote for RFK, then that's going to help Trump get elected. Once he was on the same team as Trump, now that he's part of, he was about to be,
they saw you as Trump,
about to be confirmed, or now that he's part of the system or whatever, they were really, happen to support Anthony Fauci, and they know that RFK is against Anthony Fauci, or they're really in support of the vaccination system and the vaccines. So they're like, oh, he's this and this. So, but anyways, getting back to this post I saw, a friend of mine posted, he'll probably see this in that. So he posted, he knows I like him, but he posted a video, this is RFK, some random guy. This is RFK washing his hands. And he's like, oh, the fluoride's burning my hands. So I said, no, he's actually washing something like he's washing his hands with methylene blue that they use to dye his jeans, because he wears jeans all the time. So I just added on to it.
Yeah, just a little lighthearted.
Which I would imagine RFK would laugh at that.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because people know that he takes methylene blue, which was created as a fabric dye, a blue fabric dye.
Yeah.
And now people take it because there's all this evidence that it helps your mitochondria and other conditions. So.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like I try to take the edge off of those types of posts and situations and just sort of stick to facts and make people curious.
Yeah.
That's my job as a scientist, is to make people curious, right? Because you are intelligent, I'm intelligent, we have the right to come to our own conclusions. But if I can make you curious enough to look at, many different angles, of the same thing, then you'll be better for it, I'll be better for it. And that's really what I think is the goal.
I love that. And I also like it because you're an educator.
Yeah.
But you're also a member of the club, like you're an MD. Yeah. So, and you were trained in a certain way, which was to accept what you were taught.
That's right.
And, but you're also of the older generation.
Yes.
You're people don't question things as much as they did when we were younger.
Oh no.
We just questioned everything. Like we didn't care. But the other point that I wanted to make, which I think is interesting about your approach, is that, I've been thinking about this and talking about this a lot, is that this is 2023. We have a political movement or an ideology where people are saying trust the science or trust the experts.
Right.
But it's really there to combat another type of reality that's happening in society now, which people aren't thinking about, which is more and more people have very high educations.
Yes.
And because of the internet, more and more of us have full access to all the same information.
Yes.
So we're really all becoming like Da Vinci. We're all becoming like polymaths.
Yes.
Where any one of us can, if we decided to take the time, we could become an expert in anything we wanted to become an expert at.
That's right. Yep.
To complicate it further, because we've been talking about education, because this is an example that I've seen interestingly a lot, is we have our kids being taught Common Core math or a particular approach to reading and writing, and we could be professionals and we could actually, like, I'm an electrical engineer and I'm a patent attorney and I work with, engineers and scientists at the highest levels,
right,
applying these concepts.
Sure.
And I write, and then I hire lawyers who write, and then I decide not to hire certain lawyers who can't write well.
Right.
And then I teach lawyers how to write. So this is at the top, the highest levels.
You're top of the food chain.
But I've got an argument, like I've had problems with teachers where they're talking down to me, and I'm like, I do this, like, and it wasn't, which is no problem. Like, I don't care for my own ego, but it only became a problem when they were criticizing and jumping on my kid.
That's right.
And I had to, and then they would say, your child is not doing this or this or this. And a few times, not a lot, but a few times, my child was right.
Yes.
And now I am, because I'm not a micromanager. I don't get involved with stuff. I'm not a helicopter parent. I don't, and I also don't get into business of the teacher too. Like, that's something for them to work out with each other.
Sure.
But what if you pull me in, and then I see my son's being mistreated, then I'm like, well, yeah, but you're wrong, and
they don't want to hear that.
I know how to write, and you're like, so it's just all these examples in society where you see these. You see experts, literally the experts, interfacing with the teachers who are teaching our kids.
Yes.
If we're going to be future experts,
right?
And we all have to figure out a way, I think, to respect each other more.
Yes.
And then have conversations.
Good communication.
Like you're saying, where you'll say, let me help you understand, so that you understand more, and then you ask more questions, and then we can have more conversations, and then. Because that's really where society's headed.
That's right.
Because we all have access to the same stuff.
That's right.
And you're helping facilitate that access.
Right.
But some people are like, well, no, you can't give out that access. That's something that, we don't want them to understand or know.
Right. Well, because I see where they're going.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can cause more harm than good, right? You have...
You can't what you ask. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, because you said we have access to all this information on the internet. And I can't tell you how many times someone comes in and says, but I read an article that said, I'm like, but if you understood, what that article was referencing and why it was saying that it would do that.
Yeah.
But they honestly come in there thinking that they know more than they do. So a little information can sometimes be a dangerous thing.
Well, and that's used on behalf of parts of the industry too.
Right.
Where you'll take, they'll put a particular type of headline on a study.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And because they know that the press grabs that headline and they publish that headline, and now you get not only lay people, but the medical community buying into that headline,
right? Because
nobody takes the time to read the study.
That's right, and that's where I say curiosity should be promoted, because like you said, when we were younger, we questioned a lot of things, right? We didn't just take a gulp full of something and swallow it. We questioned it. We were actually told to question. That's science, right? That's what, let's say, the vaccines were all about back in the day. You challenged the effectiveness of those vaccines, and you had your peers review it and do the same procedures and, check to see if there was something that wasn't quite right. And that's how you got closer to perfection. There's never perfection, but you got to a point where you could say less than 0.1% of the people who take this vaccine are going to have adverse side effects.
Right.
But then you look, at sometimes the approach in medicine today may not be taking those same approaches. And that's why I say ask, be curious about the process.
When you talk about vaccines themselves, there's some interesting systemic or policy aspects that are at play.
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting because I don't think it's true in every instance, but there's this notion with vaccines that you have a disease that's really dangerous, which may or may not be always true.
Right.
But assuming it's really dangerous. And then you have this theory that if you give this vaccine to enough people, it'll eradicate that disease.
Right.
It calls a herd effect, right? So if you get enough people, so there's this concern that if you allow people to decide on their own, that they're not going to get that vaccine because they're concerned about the risk, then the numbers are going to go down.
Right.
And then they're not going to get a herd immunity.
That's right.
Because not enough people are getting the vaccine, and then that disease is going to come back.
Right.
So there's that argument.
Sure.
Which doesn't always, I don't think it's always true, but it's an argument. And sometimes that dynamic may happen for a given disease and a given vaccine. Then you have this other argument, which is people just think on emotion.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
You can't tell somebody, because doctors do this all the time, lawyers do it all the time.
Sure.
not all doctors do it all the time.
No.
And not all lawyers do it all the time. I don't do it. And I piss off my clients sometimes. But clients and patients don't want to hear, I don't know.
Right.
They don't want to hear, you know what, maybe.
They want
If they have a child who's 6 months old or 2 years old or 4 years old, and they're worried about them getting sick and they think it's a very dangerous disease, they don't want their doctor to say, this vaccine may protect them.
Right. They don't want to hear that.
They don't, but it also may have a risk. It also may have a risk. So what they want, which is if you look at the wording that the doctors use, that the media uses, that the whole system uses, the CDC uses, is that it's effective and safe.
Right.
And there's no ambiguity in that.
Right.
There's
right.
there's
not truthful either.
But it's not truthful either. And I think you have a system where faith in that system is put above the reality. In other words, we don't want people to start questioning the system, because if they do, then less people are going to get vaccines. If less people get vaccines, then you're gonna have a herd effect issue. That's right. Where you're gonna have like, so it's gonna be a domino effect, and so we're worried about that. And then you have people, let's say, that work for the CDC. Our jobs are related to this, so maybe our jobs are going to be. Sure. And then you have people that work for the vaccine industry, for pharmaceutical companies. They're going to lose their jobs. So you have a lot of financial incentives.
They're also giving financial incentives to make sure that this vaccine, not COVID or any others, that this medicine, let's just call it that sometimes, that this medicine actually gets approval.
Right.
And, so it's not to say that you're being told to fudge.
Well, no, and that's
or anything else, but, because your job and your research money.
You're advocating for that. You're like a lawyer would.
Your job.
Like a lawyer would. You're advocating for that to happen, right? But so now, add into those policy issues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, an additional vaccine gets added.
Yeah.
That's part of that binary, all vaccines are good messaging that we just talked about.
Right.
Because we're concerned about herd immunity.
Yeah.
We're concerned about people having faith in the vaccine system. Sure. And we're concerned about the messaging that we give to our patients, because the patients are not smart enough to understand nuance in making a decision about risk. Right.
For sure.
So, and that's the way we've been all operating. So now that additional thing gets added to the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Because of advocacy, because the company, it's doing what they can do to try to get it added to the schedule. They did some research. They convinced the FDA to allow it to go in. A couple of years later, another one gets added.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, another one gets added. So now you've got 72 shots being given to kids by the age of 4 or something. I don't know. 20-something different vaccines, right? So all these things are there, and whenever somebody discusses this issue, they talk about it as a binary issue. Either you're for all vaccines, or you're against all vaccines.
That's right.
And it's not a binary issue. It's not like an all or one. You're all in or you're all out.
That's right.
And I think if you look at all the pieces of what we just discussed, you can see how we got there.
But here's the problem, I think, is the messaging.
Yeah.
The messaging, like you said, we should message in reality, which means that instead of saying that Haemophilus influenza type B vaccination needs to be taken because it's safe and effective, there are kids who have gotten it and died, right? I mean, that's a fact. You can't skirt around that. You can't lie about that. But what you can say is, because of this vaccination, only 1 to 2 kids in America who've had it die each year from Haemophilus influenza type B. If you go anywhere else in the world, the deaths without vaccinations are between 4 and 6 million. So can you be guaranteed that when you get on a plane that it's not going to crash? When you get in your car that it's not going to crash? You're not going to die. There are some inherent risks in life. And I think we have to stop telling the falsehood that everything is going to be safe and that you must have it, that it is going to be effective. I think we just have to be more honest, about it, and to say things like, I ask my students to think about it. All those schedules of vaccinations, instead of saying, no, don't take vaccinations or don't take the new ones that are coming, you have to ask yourself, what is my risk if I don't, right? Find that out first. If you looked at COVID and you said, what was the risk of someone between 0 and 18 dying if they had been exposed to COVID or not? I just say, look that up. I don't tell them, I said, just look it up and see if it is that essential for you to have that vaccination, because you're right. 72 vaccinations by the time they're 4, that's a hell of a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have to, average intelligence would say you have to question why there's so many, right? And who's benefiting from, financially, who's benefiting? Those are questions that you ask, but really brass tacks comes down into how much risk am I willing to take as a human being? I even, for ladies, when I was doing my OBGYN rotations, medical school, there were ladies who wanted to have, natural birth underwater, right, at home with no intensive care unit nearby, so that if the cord got wrapped around the baby's head, the baby would just die, right? And so, I said, you can do those things. Yeah. You can have this wonderful Mozart playing in the background, but what's the most important thing to you? And they're like, our child. I said, so if you have complications, you're going to lose the child potentially.
Wow.
So you just lay out the risks, right? Yeah. And you say, here are facts. This is how many people have lived. This is how many people have died. This is how effective it's been. And, at some point, I think most people are going to have common sense and say, if I have comorbidities like diabetes and lung cancer, then I probably need that booster vaccination, right? Because the acidosis in my body is denaturing those antibodies at a faster rate than it is you or me, right? And so now it sort of makes sense. If you educate the person and give them enough validity, nothing is a guarantee in life.
And help them make the decision.
And help them make a good decision.
But an informed decision.
A very informed decision. And that's why I say curiosity is so important. Yeah. Because then you start to ask yourself, we had a priest that lives up the road from us. He needed monoclonal antibodies to survive COVID, and he said, what should I do? I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I said, here's the situation. You have diabetes and your antibodies aren't in large enough quantities to be able to coat those viruses so that they can't attach to your lung cells. And so the monoclonal antibodies have that same shape match that will bind to the COVID, virus, the spike proteins. I said, so look it up, watch a few of the talks, that are given. He did. And he said, I understand now. He says, it makes sense to me. He says, you may go and, get the monoclonal antibodies. But see, I wanted him to take some ownership, and I also wanted him to be curious enough to say, I'm not just doing this because someone tells me to, right?
Right.
If you told your kid, don't touch that, it's hot. Right? Totally. Because you're telling them to, they're not going to do it.
It's funny. I tease a couple of my doctors with this, and actually my hairstylist is before too. So, you remember the Flowbee?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had one.
So Flowbees, you cut your hair, and it's this device you hook up to the end of a vacuum.
Yes.
A vacuum cleaner, right? So you have a vacuum cleaner, and you got the suction force, and it pulls your hair up.
Yeah.
And it cuts it all the same height, right? And so you don't have to go get your hair cut at the hair salon or at a barber.
Right.
You just take the Flowbee and you go,
you just need a ball from Three Stooges look.
So
all the hair is the same length.
Generally speaking, nowadays, if you look on the internet and you go to WebMD or whatever, and you look at whatever your situation is, it'll tell you, you'll learn the protocol.
Yes.
And the protocol say, do this. If not this, do this, do this. Not this, do this. It's very mechanistic.
Right.
When you go to the doctor's office now, they pull up their laptop, and they're literally looking at an algorithm.
They are.
Which is a protocol that's do this, 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 and this. So my question, and I had this with my hairstylist years ago when she was like, what number do you want on the trimmer?
Clipper, yeah.
On the clipper. And I'm like, that's all you're going to do? Because I could just go get a Flowbee. So So my point is that not only should the doctor be like, okay, but let's think this through for you,
Right.
and should we not have pressure because the practice combined with the insurance companies are pressuring the doctor to use a particular protocol.
That's right.
Almost in every instance.
Yes.
And then tell the patient this is the protocol.
Yes.
Without any discussion about why is it good for me.
That's right.
And so that's the issue.
It is. I mean,
We're all using a Flowbee.
That's it. We're using AI in a sense, right?
Yeah.
We're being given an algorithm that's going to tell us what we should do, and we just, like a Paul Parrot, speak it. I'll give you a good example of educating someone so that they do what they want to do, right? I gave you the illustration of the kid touching something hot when you don't want to. But with my kids, I turned on the oven and I put their hand on the oven as the oven was getting warmer. And I held their hand there until it got a little uncomfortable. I said, now you see why I tell you not to touch that hot oven.
Right.
Okay? And so they got it. Well, for diabetics, you say, you need to move more, right? And they say, well, why do I need to do that? You know, it's kind of painful. Like my toes, you know, my foot, it just feels like needles, pins and needles. And I say, but if I educate you, I said, I think you'll want to keep your toes. And that's what I asked them. Do you like your toes? Do you want to keep them? And yes. I said, do you like your foot? You want to keep your foot? And they say, yes. And I said, well, the bacteria that causes gangrene cannot live in the presence of oxygen, which means if you're not moving and the blood's not flowing, oxygen isn't getting to your toes. So the bacteria can have a heyday and multiply and grow and grow and grow. And then they start eating your feet. And then, you know, and then there's nothing you can do. You have to have it chopped off. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so then they start to say, well, it is a little uncomfortable, you know, to feel those pins and needles, just like if your leg fell asleep or you sat on it for too long, you didn't get enough blood supply. When the blood comes back in, the oxygen causes that pain. I said, but that's actually a good sign. Yeah. Because that means oxygen is getting there and shielding those bacteria. Right. And you get to keep your toes. And they're like, you know what? I see totally different now. Yeah. What was the difference? If I just told them, you need to walk more. Totally different. Right. You're going to lose your toes if you don't walk more. Okay. And then just walk out of the office. But if you were explaining to them, you know, and that's what I mean about trusting the science. Explain a little bit more. Well, you know, it didn't take but 30 seconds to explain that. No, it's true. It's totally true. It's interesting. There's got to be a way where we can. I mean, it's happening. Yeah. Like I was telling you a little while ago, like these doctors that got to a certain age, and they started realizing, okay, I'm at that age where I'm losing muscle mass, or I'm not feeling as energetic. Mm-hmm. And they started looking at what are my options, and then they started realizing that there's nothing in the medical protocols to address this. Yeah. But there's all this research. Right. And all the research is saying, well, you want to lift heavy. Mm-hmm. This is for men and women. When you get in your 40s, 50s, and older, it's never too late. You can lift heavy when you're older. Absolutely. And the more muscle mass you have, the longer you'll live. Yes. And also the quality of life is going to be better. And also the rates of dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's go down. And also the rates of type 2 diabetes go down. Yep. And all these things are tied to that. But nobody ever did that 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But nobody's explaining how or why. Right. Well, they're teaching, but now online. My point is that now online, and they're writing books. Yeah. And you can go on to you can follow them on on Instagram, where you can, and they do podcasts, and then like Peter Attia does these podcasts where he has experts, doctors who do research. Yeah. And then he has these conversations on the podcast, and you're learning. Yep. Like MD level stuff, and MDs subscribe to it, and they're learning. Sure, absolutely. So there's the messaging. Yeah, right? Yeah. There's the messaging. So we're now. It's like it's like a revolution of speak, so to speak, sure. Because of the internet. You know, what scares me though is that they're going to keep that level of communication too high, which means that you just said that if you have more muscle mass, you lift heavier, that you're going to have more longevity, right, in life. But why? Why does that matter? Well, muscle is going to put more stress on the bones. And when you put more stress on the bones, you're going to cause what we call appositional growth, which means the bones are going to get thicker. If the bones get thicker, you're less likely to break those bones.
Yeah.
Guess what the number one cause of death in the elderly is? A broken bone when they're immobile. Because if they're immobile, then they get a bed sore, and then the bed sore is staph aureus, which is very, very resistant to antibiotics.
Very high death
and they check out, right?
Very high death rate.
So if you give them, just like I did with the diabetes, knowing that bacteria can't live in the presence of oxygen, see, that's bringing it down to the level of the common everyday layperson.
Yeah.
Right. Dementia goes down dramatically whenever you exercise and do weightlifting. Why? Because the blood circulates. The blood is not only bringing nutrients to the brain, it's also taking the toxins and the waste out of the brain.
Yeah.
And so the more circulation you have, and see, these are basic concepts. And so I'm hoping that too
It is
part of it.
It is. Some of the reasoning behind it is a little different than you said. Like, I mean, I've heard the argument about the bones. Like, there was a study, I think it was 80 or 90-year-olds, and they had them literally doing with a barbell squats and deadlifts.
Yeah, yeah.
And they did these, I think it was MRIs, where it wasn't just a DEXA scan, it was MRIs, and the structure of their bones,
The bone density.
not only the density, but the actual structure, the bones themselves re-engineered themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And the shape changed.
Yes.
To make it support what
That's appositional growth.
Yeah. And
But you know, the other part of that they don't tell you, though, is that you can do heavy weightlifting all the day long, but if your nutrition doesn't match it, it's not going to happen. Which means that if you're if I tell you to bake a cake, if you don't have flour and you don't have eggs and you don't have oil, you can't make it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to build bone due to the heavy lifting, the muscles are putting the stress on it. You not only need calcium, but you can't absorb calcium without vitamin D. Mm-hmm. Vitamin D makes it possible to absorb the calcium. Mm-hmm. So you could take 3,000 units of calcium a day and be heavy lifting and still see your bones the same way they were yesterday.
I think that was part of the study. Yeah. And there's been a lot of talk about where many people don't eat enough protein.
Yes, absolutely.
And we really need to up the quality protein and the amount of quality protein we have in our diet. Even
if you're a vegan vegetarian, you see what I mean? Like there's basics.
There are ways to get protein.
But see, they don't tell you that it's not just an increase in protein. Once again, you can increase your protein, but if it doesn't have the 9 essential amino acids, then you can't build certain proteins.
And there are
gives it to you, right?
Yeah, there are.
Drink milk or eat cheese or.
People tell me this all the time, and it drives me nuts. Peanuts are not protein. Peanuts are fat.
It's half fat, half protein. Look at it'll say 16 grams, right? 8 grams of fat, 8 grams of protein. That's on every label.
I don't think it's 8 grams.
I think it is.
But it's not on a
But it's not a good source of protein. Like it's a better source of fat.
No, it's I think it's like 10 grams of fat, 2 grams of protein, and 2 grams of carbs.
I think it's
I bet you.
Sure.
Check it.
Yeah.
I just want to be right.
Absolutely.
Because you're an MD and I
yeah, no. I mean,
no.
I don't eat this on a peanut butter because it has most fat in it, right?
This is an argument that I'm always having because people think I'm like, you need protein, and they're like, oh, I eat peanuts.
Yeah.
Or I eat peanut powder, or I eat peanut butter. And I'm like, that's not protein. That's a fat.
That's right.
With some carbs and with some protein in it.
And here we'll get, see, protein, 8 grams.
So 8 grams out of how much?
8 grams of protein and 2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons. And then how much carbs?
I knew it. Huh?
How much carbs is it?
I don't know about the carbs. I don't think it's very much in the way of carbs, unless the sugar.
So the breakdown.
If you get the natural peanut butter, it's not a lot of carbs.
So 16.
Mostly fat.
So 16 grams
is fat.
16 grams is 8 units of fat.
Yeah.
So it's an 8-to-1 fat to protein, and the amount of carbs is almost as much as it is protein.
Yeah, it's a terrible source. I mean, I'm not advocating for it at all. I mean, it's because what they'll do.
Yeah, you're right about the 8 grams.
They'll cut up apples, right?
Yeah.
Apple slice. And like, I'm getting more protein.
And then you put
dip it
protein
in.
on it, yeah.
And like, you're making yourself.
And it's not quality protein.
No.
So you're not. So eggs is quality protein.
Absolutely.
Eggs is quality protein.
That's why I say be a lacto-ovo vegetarian, right? So if you're eating cheese, drinking milk, then you're going to get all of the essential amino acids you need. All 9 essential amino acids are in that. But if you're a vegan vegetarian, eat quinoa because it has the bioavailability of all essential amino acids.
Oh, quinoa does.
Yeah, quinoa is a great way if you are adamant.
Don't rice and beans have a good combination?
They do, but that's methionine and lysine. So the legumes, which is the beans, has lysine in it, and the methionine is in the rice. So those are 2 essential amino acids, but they have to be eaten at the same time.
Complement each other.
So that's why the Spanish population has rice and beans.
Yeah.
So now you know, right?
Yeah. So I think it's really good that, like you're saying, like you explain the right things.
Yes.
You get this partnership.
Yep.
Where you work with each other, you learn together.
And ask questions. You know what I mean? My students come back all the time. Dr. Hoover, I looked up that thing on variants, and I found out that each variant is less dangerous than the original. Why?
Variants of what?
It's a very good of a virus. Let's say whenever COVID came out and then a new variant, because, the virus doesn't want to be killed.
Right.
It tries to find ways to save itself. So it changes some of the spike proteins to have different shapes, right? And so when those variants come out, they asked me, why are they less dangerous? And I said, well, because each variant has a shorter spike protein than the one before it, which means that if you have enough antibodies to the original spike protein, it creates a distance with that excessive, immunobody, antibody on top of the spike protein that the shorter ones can't reach up and attach to your cells, right? So it would be like you and me sitting here, and if I was pushed over to that end of the couch, I couldn't reach and shake your hand because I was too far away. Mm-hmm. So as long as you have antibodies to the first, which comes from natural immunity or boosters or the vaccine itself, then those longer proteins are going to keep you too far away from the shorter ones that are new that you don't have antibodies against, right?
Oh, okay. So the existing immunity that you have protects you against the new.
That's right. Okay. See, now nobody tells you that.
Right.
And so my students, I sent them out to find that information first, and then they come back with good questions, right? And I've empowered them to feel like they're the ones who got the information they needed to come to a valuable conclusion.
So what are the students that you're teaching studying for? What are they?
Nursing and medical schools.
Okay.
So
they're getting the prerequisites for nursing and medical school.
Yeah. So that's the foundation. And like you said, I always ask them to question the science. I said, I think it's important. Do we need vaccines? Absolutely. And I think even RFK came out, this morning about the measles and said, I'm not telling anyone not to get the vaccines. He says you need it. And he even mentioned herd immunity, how important it was.
Yeah.
But, when other vaccines come out, that aren't as contagious or deadly, do your research.
One of the things that I learned about that people don't talk about a lot is we talk about vaccines generally. We talk about whether a study was done. We talk about the risks of certain things happening. But there's a functional aspect of a lot of our vaccines that's not that hard to understand.
That's right.
It's a lot of these vaccines have dead versions of the virus.
That's right.
So if you just gave that dead version of the virus to a person, it wouldn't trigger the immune system. And hear me out.
Yeah.
That's a simplistic way of explaining it, but therefore they put what's called an adjuvant, which is one of the most popular adjuvants is aluminum,
right?
And that toxic element causes your immune system to go crazy.
Oh yeah,
and sets that immune system in play. So now it's looking at the dead virus and it's creating. So
it sees the dead virus with better eyes.
Right. So those adjuvants, in a lot of these vaccines happen to be aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
So I was having dinner with this one woman who's is a biotech specialist, and she's a professor at a university, and we had this conversation about RFK, and I said I like him, So she's like, well, he's anti-vax. And I said, well, so we had this conversation, and she happened to be very aware of the risks associated with aluminum, and had decided to stop using underarm deodorant that has aluminum. And so she was very sensitive to that. But she didn't realize that the most common adjuvant was aluminum.
That's right.
So once I explained that to her, and it was like wow, like her whole perspective, her whole frame of mind changed.
Exactly.
And so I was like, yeah, there's something, and maybe there's no harm, but they haven't studied that.
Right.
And that's what RFK's argument is.
And now she's educated about it, so she can say to herself,
right,
does the risk outweigh the benefit? Meaning if I don't get boosters, but I get the initial that has the aluminum in it that points out, let's call it that, points out the viral spike protein, so that my immune system really rages against it and makes lots of antibodies so that I'm protected.
Is that enough?
Is that enough
boosters
for me to say, I'll get the original, but I don't need the booster?
Or if you have a vaccine schedule, and you have 20-something vaccines, and then including boosters at 72 shots, does it matter how close you're giving those shots to each other? Does it matter the fact that you have a compound shot, like that you're vaccinating against 3 or 4 or 5 different diseases at the same time,
right?
And does that increase the effect of the adjuvant on you? And then the other
dangerous side of it.
And then the other part of this is that my understanding is that there's actual research to back this up, that the adjuvant passes the blood-brain barrier, so it goes into your brain.
That's right.
And my other understanding is that because it's such a small amount, it's actually worse, because your body is not
doesn't recognize
responding to it,
right,
creating a coating, causing you to pass it through your digestive system and then get rid of it. No, it's so small that it's just going right into your brain.
Exactly.
So that's the issue.
That's right.
Functionally speaking, we don't know whether that's causing harm or not. Right.
But are you willing to take the risk?
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
And should we look at it? And that's RFK's only point, is we should look at that.
We should definitely look at it. And that's what I mean about questioning. And again, that used to be at the heart of science. Question everything, right? Do double-blind studies.
Right.
Question everything, so that, again, nothing's going to be perfect. But if you have ruled out as many possible, things that can cause harm, then you should rule them out. You should remove them.
Right.
And so, but that's what I think is missing now, because no one really questions. You can use the guise, maybe, of a world pandemic, right? We're not going to go into any politics behind that, because it was a dangerous time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it creates dangerous measures.
Right.
But be careful not to let that become the norm.
Yeah.
With all future vaccines that aren't associated with pandemics. Right?
We don't want to create a situation where people are unable to question the treatment that they're given that can affect their health.
That's right.
And
well, don't let them don't let the research companies skirt that defining process of removing all of the potential harms.
Yeah.
Just in the sake of getting it to market. Right. Now, we had to have something get to market for the pandemic. We all know that.
Like, did we cut some corners that we might not have had to, or did we have to because of the time constraints?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But you don't want that to become the norm for something that's not as scary.
Right.
You don't want that. Well, we did it for that, so let's do it for this.
Right.
You're like, well, wait a minute, but this isn't. It was like killing everyone.
So
why would we rush?
I don't like the idea they're talking about using the same mRNA type of approach, that same technology platform, for example, like vaccinating, all of the meat that we eat, and whether that's going to impact on our, on our livestock and us consuming those, the meat from those livestock. It's interesting. And whether or not they're additional vaccines.
Well, see, here
they're going to use the same platform, and then they're going to just kind of use it.
But see, here again, we have to educate and then question, because if you educate and you say, your white blood cells are soldiers, right? And your white blood cells are soldiers that come into contact with things that they don't know. And it's a lot different whenever you come into contact with an enemy. You in martial arts would know this, right? If somebody came in from another country and was a martial arts expert, and they challenged you to a match, and you've never seen them before, you don't know what they studied, your approach to the way you're going to battle is going to be different, isn't it? Versus if you knew someone who knew jiu-jitsu, who knew judo, who knew karate, you know where they're coming from, so you're going to respond in a certain way and be aggressive in a certain way. But when you don't know something, you're going to be as, protecting yourself in a much different way. You're not going to take as many chances, are you?
Right.
So we have to look at our white blood cells that way. And if we use mRNA, we're basically telling them how to protect themselves only one way, right? We're giving them one spike protein. And basically what we're doing, we're giving them code that will cause cells to produce a bunch of these spike proteins, but only that one spike protein, which means that whenever your white blood cells come into contact with it, they're only making antibodies against that one spike protein. Instead of coming into contact with the actual virus itself, where there are many spike proteins.
It's going to be more robust immunity.
Absolutely, because now you're going to be making antibodies not only against that one big spike protein, but all of the others.
Yeah.
That potentially cause you harm, right?
Yeah.
So, are you skirting the system if you're doing that all the time, right?
Yeah.
There are times when you need it, and it's, and you have to save the world. But there are other times whenever you say, I think your parents should say you eat a peck of dirt before you die.
When the vaccine just came out, a friend of mine said that, we're trying to figure, the pharmaceutical industry is trying to figure this out. They've chosen the spike protein. It's like throwing a life raft out in turbulent waters. Like you're still trying to tread water to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And this is something that it's like punting the football.
Yes.
Right.
You're prolonging.
we don't know how to fix this problem yet.
Let's get that team.
There's really no way to get herd effect even with the vaccine, even if it works.
Right.
But it's something that might increase the survival rates.
Exactly.
And that was the strategy. That was the theory.
Sure.
But then
why do teams run practices? Yeah. Run drills, right? And do plays. It's because, will they work every single time? No, right? But I would much rather have a team that has gone out and run the same routes and the same defenses, over and over and over again and practice those, that on game day they have a much better chance of winning, right?
Right.
Versus throwing someone out on the field for the very first time. All 11 guys on the field don't know each other, have never played together, and never run any plays.
Right.
See what I mean? So.
Oh, right. So that's
what I'm saying.
That's like the first analogy is where you have the ability to present a more complete vaccine.
Yeah.
That prompts the immune system to create a more of a robust response.
That's right.
Versus rushing just one part of the virus in there.
Right.
We don't have a lot of time. We're going to try it this way, and now it's like putting the team that's not experienced out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
You want to give, the body, and that's why natural immunity should be adjunctive to the vaccinations, right?
Yeah.
Because people who, had contracted COVID without a booster or without a vaccination had even better results. Because their body created more antibodies against different antigens that were sticking up off of the surface of the COVID virus.
Yeah.
Versus you or me, if we got a vaccination, we only had antibodies against that one spike protein.
I have regrets because I'm pretty sure I had COVID at the beginning, which was March of 2020, because I went to New Orleans that month, and then I got this cold. But you couldn't test for COVID.
Right.
So I don't know for sure one way or the other. So when the vaccine came out a year later, somebody told me I should get it. And I said, well, so I got it, but I probably shouldn't have. Yeah. Because I probably had stronger immunity. And I know I'm not explaining this right, but I worry that if you've got good immunity and then you vaccinate, you're messing with that same system, so you could effectively weaken that same immunity.
Well, that's what I mean about.
Like I don't know.
That's what I mean about soldiers getting lazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't go out and do their drills and practice their combat tactics on a regular basis, they get lazy, right?
Right.
And then they're caught by surprise, and then they could die, right?
Right.
So you want to have that natural immunity adjunctive to, let's say a vaccination schedule, because we all know things like hepatitis B, right? You have to have a booster every once in a while, every 5 years, because the memory cells, the lymphocytes, forget, or they die off in a sense, and they don't make as many antibodies as they used to. So you need to rev up the machine again, meaning make your soldiers go out and practice, right? But again, if you're only giving one drill to practice, what if your opponent, knows jujitsu and you weren't expecting that?
Right.
You only train to fight against one competitor.
So you can't deal with a choke,
Yes.
or you can't deal with a certain takedown or a full guard where the legs are wrapped around you.
That's right.
You don't know how to deal with that.
And so you're done.
Yeah.
Or you lose. That's what I fear whenever we rush to things too quickly. Because you want to say, okay, my colleagues who've been doing research, in Australia have said that, in conjunction with, at a certain age, if, they have tried and tested and proven this under multiple circumstances, right? With exposure. Think about whenever you were a kid. We used to have chickenpox parties, right? My parents would hear that my cousins had chickenpox, and guess what? We all went over. We didn't know it, but the parents knew it. Yeah. We got exposed to it, and then we started making antibodies against it,
right?
And we were protected in the future, which means that I won't get shingles now,
right?
So there was a rhyme and a reason for some of the stuff that was done, right? But if you're just giving one single, protective, antibody production.
Well, there's this one expert that he's written a lot about it. He was saying that if there's a pandemic, you don't vaccinate during a pandemic unless you have a vaccine that kills the virus completely.
That's right.
Because if it doesn't, then you're only going to speed up the variants and all that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but again, it's not putting a time frame, on some of these vaccines unless it's an emergency,
right?
Like it was during the pandemic, right? Nobody knew, so you figured that it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah,
because you don't know if this is Ebola, right?
God. Well, that's what was interesting. That it's obviously part of some emergency protocol, and it's like another Flowbee.
Yeah.
They're creating this process. So if they can call something a pandemic, then they're going to use the same Flowbee.
Yeah. And that's why I tell my students to be curious and to question. A lot of the African American community, rebelled against the vaccination because in the past there have been instances and circumstances where they have been, taken advantage of.
Yeah, this trust issue
with vaccinations.
Tulsa.
Yes. And so, there's nothing wrong with questioning.
Yeah.
And then at some point you just have to say, is it worth the risk? Do I get on this plane to fly across country? Well, I heard that, the helicopter flew up and hit the plane and, people died. But that can happen. But, are you willing to take the risk?
Right.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
But you want to know that, that plane's been inspected, that the, pilots are not inebriated.
Yeah.
All of the other things,
sure.
and then you make an informed decision, but I think we have to question.
Yeah, they do.
That's the key.
Thanks, really.
Curious and question.
Well, we should probably, on that note, wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Thank you really much. A lot.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This is fun. I like this. And again, anybody who's listening, question, be curious, look for answers, and find someone who can bring it down to your level first, and then build off.
Yeah,
that's my advice. Because sometimes you listen to experts and you're almost tempted to do what they say, just because they are experts. But get someone to explain it to you in a way that you understand first.
If you can't get on the same page and relate to each other,
that's right,
and you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing,
yes, then don't do it.
That's always concerning.
Yeah, it's fearful
for me, but that's the way I am.
I am.
Some people don't want to know.
No, I know.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, my mom was always that way.
Yeah, tell me what
This
to
is
do.
it. What do I need to do? I don't want to know about it. It scares me to know about it.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, this is good stuff. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.